Welcome back to another episode. In this episode, I'm going to make a set of drawers. What you're watching is me load my truck with 13 sheets of $70 per sheet plywood from Home Depot. Highway robbery, I tell you. And now here I am in my shop with the big CNC machine, and I'm running most of these boards, just about all of them, through a series of cuts. I'm going to make up this set of drawers. It's going to have 48 individual drawers, 20 inches deep, 96 inches wide, 34 inches tall after everything is said and done. And I made all these Illustrator files based on some dimensions inside the room where it's going to go. And now I'm doing my first test cuts. What I do is I make the vectors on Illustrator and I bring them in and make them into cut paths. I'm still not very proficient at making 3D models, so I could think in 2D and 3D at the same time. And so here is my 2D models going together to become 3D. I'm making sure they fit together because there's a lot of pieces to fit together. I want to make sure everything's going to go well. I made a couple of adjustments so that they nest a little bit deeper, and now here I am making the rest of the parts. And it's funny, a lot of people say just push the button and go, but there's a lot of work. You'll see by the end of this how much work I actually had to do. Not to mention I had to spend a lot of time at the CNC machine making adjustments. And now here I am in my other shop, and I'm using the welding table. I use the welding table for this whole video because it's flat. And I'm using the welding table to assemble my egg crate. This is basically going to be an egg crate. And it's a little bit of a wrestling match to get it to go together. But you can see it falls together pretty quickly. And I had envisioned, this video is sponsored by Type-On Glue, and I had envisioned gluing all this together, but I felt let the glue go on the parts around this. I was afraid I was going to have glue drips everywhere, and the glue drips were going to prohibit clean, proficient draw slides. So I figured I'd leave all the glue off of this and put the glue on the edges, and you'll see what I'm doing. So firstly, I'm doing is screwing everything together with my Robertsons. These are 1 1/4 inch slim screws, and they're great for end drilling into 1/2 inch plywood. And I did cut one drawer out, and I want to make sure this drawer fits into all the cubby holes. So I put this drawer together really just as a test for the draw file, and also to make sure that we have some regularity, and we certainly did. And now this is a piece of wood left over from the Netflix show, and we're putting a bunch of Type-On 3 and Type-On 2 on the bottom of it, and we're going to slide it underneath it, and it's going to become the bottom. I'm going to start building up the girth around this. This egg crate is very floppy-doppy. It's really flexible. I'm adding these laminates around the whole circumference to give it some rigidity, and then when I put the back on it, it really locks it into shape. While the glue dries, I'm going to the edge banding, and I'm making all the hardwood edge banding out of sapele that I had from a previous project. And I'm cutting everything because it's on the CNC. I know the exact length of all the parts, so I'm cutting all the parts to the exact length that I had predetermined, and I don't need to custom fit each piece. And I'm using stopper on my chop saw there. And now some time has passed, and it's time to flip over the cabinet and glue a laminate to the other side. And it helps square everything up as well. And you see the glue is going right into all that end grain where the egg crate design sticks through the side walls, and all that's going to get locked together, which is why I decided not to put glue in between all the joints that get slid together. And to glue the back on, I'm using this Fast Set construction adhesive from Type-On, and it actually worked out really good because it doesn't drip. You could squirt it and it stays in place while you're busy getting your board to come in to play, and it's worked out great. It ended up becoming a big asset to this whole build. And now I'm nailing the back on just to hold it in place while the glue dries, but also I'm clamping. So by using the welding table, it was a big hit because I'm able to put those stoppers on one side and then use them as a clamp on the opposite side. I'm gluing walnut MDF to the sides. I'm using the construction adhesive and a little bit of regular glue because I ran out of the construction adhesive, at least for that shot. And now I'm making sure everything's laminated nice and tightly. Everything's going to get edge banded. Now this is something, even though this is a CNC design and I tried my best to be perfect, some of the machining ended up double cutting an edge, fell out of position, the tabs didn't hold, and so I don't have perfect cuts everywhere, and so that's why I use this long board to make sure everything's faced surface as clean as I possibly can get it. And now that I'm nailing all the edge banding on, same thing. I'll glue all the edge banding on, and then I will also go on it with the long board. That long board has 80 grit, and I use a weight. And the 32-inch nailer is unbelievable. The battery operated nail is one of the best tools I bought in the last couple of years. I use it for so many things. When you're going to glue two pieces together and you don't want them to slip and slide, just throw a little bit of a nail in there in a discrete spot. And it doesn't really inhibit your sanders, and you certainly don't want to plane through it, but if you did, it wouldn't be as bad as planing through an 18 gauge nail. I'm securing all the ends of the loose egg crates in the vertical position with one big piece of vertical edge banding. Does that make sense? And all the horizontals on this end of the egg crate design are all one solid piece. So they'll get individual pieces because it already has its structure. So all the verticals are getting the structure from the thick edge banding. And now I'll put all the pieces in between that, like I said before, because this is a CNC regulated shape. All those lengths are exactly the same. And I could just throw them on the chop saw, and I don't have to keep going back and forth and checking. And now that I let the glue dry a little bit, I'm using Titebond 3 pretty much for everything because I like the way it sands. It's also waterproof, but that's not really a concern. For me, I like the way it sands versus some of the other glues. And it dries dark, so it doesn't show as often. And here I am just making sure all that face frame looks nice and clean in the same plane by using this 80 grit sanding block. And you see I have that steel weight on there. Now it's time to make the top. These are 10-inch wide planks that I had in my container. I got these in Brooklyn years and years ago. These are white oak. Really, really, really hardy white oak. It's hard to plane this stuff. I also need sharp blades in my planer. That's probably more of the problem than this wood. But this old school white oak that's been drying for probably 10 to 12 years is so tough. It's also very heavy, so having this long track saw really helps. I don't have to wrestle it through the table saw, especially with no outfeed table. It makes life very difficult. This track saws come in super handy. And I have to butt join them, and in another time and place I'd bring them over to the joiner, but I'm not going to do that because this is going to come together just right. Now I'm going to get my biscuit joiner and biscuit join the two edges together. We're going to have a nice solid one-piece top. I'm not going to attach it till the very end because it's so heavy. This whole thing is very heavy with all the drawers and everything in it. I'm working my seam across with a scraper. That's from DFM Tools. If you haven't used a scraper yet, get into it. It'll change your life. And now here again, instead of throwing it through the table saw, which would be like wrestling a bear, I'm just cutting it right in place with the track saw. And I detach a piece off the track saw to cut the cross cuts that are shorter. And now I am to my length. I had to rough cut those pieces from the original stock because I'm going to use every piece that's left over for the draw faces. And when I say every piece, I did not have any scraps to be able to fake up or even individually piece together a face of a draw. I had exactly 48. And now I'm using Gleam from Total Boat. I used 2 coats of gloss to build up a layer, and then on top of that I'll do satin as my final coat to give it a little bit more of a cut down sheen. Now I decided to do a base plate for the entire unit so that it needed to get some strength. I talked earlier about how it being a little bit flexible, and this would get rid of some of that flexibility. And I had just enough of this white oak, so I'm using some old poplar that I had left over from the pool table build to give it some strength, and then about 3/8 piece of white oak on the face. That'll give it the look, and everything else is going to give it the strength. And I'm going to miter the corners so when they come together at the bottom of the cabinet, it's going to look nice. I also put a round over on that as well. And so there it is coming together. And having the weld table is a dream. If you're a woodworker, I think every woodworker should have this welding table or a table like it. A flat table, and it's obviously, you can clamp down to it. The glue doesn't stick to it. The dried glue just flakes right off. You could just use a piece of wood to scrape it and it just flakes right off. It's really been a pleasure. And they don't promote it for woodworkers at all. But me being a woodworker and a welder, I use it all the time. It's really my go-to. And now these are some draw faces. I'm just showing you a little pause about where I'm at. We have the base plate is drying on the welding table. And you see how I'm able to square everything up with the stoppers that are built into the table. And I made a bunch of drawers. I still have a lot more to go. And you can see each one of those is 6 pieces. And that's how many I need going across. 8 across, 6 high. So I started ganging the parts up so that I get more yield out of my plywood. And now this is the top. And the top's got a few coats of Total Boat Gleam on it. And I've sanded in between the coats. And we're in good shape. And here I am making the drawers. And whatever I had left over from making the tops, those pieces were 10 feet long. So I had 2-foot pieces left over from 2 of the planks. I had the entire 3rd plank, which I cut the base plate face out of. And now making as many drawers as I can possibly make. And I came up with exactly 48 drawers, which was crazy. Drawer fronts. And so I take them, I cut them, I put them through the planer, and the planer gives them the chatter, so I'm sanding that chatter off. If I had a surface sander, like I do, but it's too weak, I tried, it just doesn't work. So I take it over here to my big double D sander, that's 32-inch two-sided disc sander. And now here I am using my Jessam router table to put a small round over on each piece. And I do the round over, and then I hit them with the hand, just a little piece of a hand block, just to get rid of any fuzz or anything like that. And they end up looking really nice. They came together nice. But this project makes me want to get a surface sander. And now here I am with more gleam. Again, I build it up with the gloss, and then I go back over it with the satin a little bit later. The gloss gives it a nice deep coat right away. And now I'm prepping the base plate. I'm putting a small round over on it. And I didn't make a kick plate. This is not a kitchen cabinet. I wanted it to feel like it had some weight and that it was sitting on a little cushion of wood. It's 2 inches high. And also, as I said earlier, I wanted to make sure that this acts like an I-beam to make sure that this thing doesn't flex. I'm using some more of the construction adhesive. This is a perfect opportunity because I can move it around. I can go set it in place, and the glue is not going to run off and get in my hand and get on my feet and get everywhere. So this construction adhesive came in real handy in this build. And now here I put it to the back. I had put a little 1/8 inch strip to hold it up in the air, so when I stuck this against the welding table, the round over didn't get lost in the back. So the round over does pillow out of the back of the unit just a little bit, and the back of the unit is going to be seen. And I'm making sure that my clamps are right where they need to be, and that I have a little spacer there. I'm making sure that this is sticking out exactly a 1/2 inch. With that construction adhesive, it's a little squirrely. You want to be careful it's not slipping and sliding. You want to make sure it lands exactly where you want it to be. And then I throw some screws directly into it. And some screws fall into the cavity for the drawer, and I take them out later once the glue is secured. So I'm really just using the screws as a clamp. I take out the few that went inside the drawer cavity. And I'm moving right through this project. This project took me exactly 7 days from concept to finish. And here I am, blowing it out, because now I'm going to start to build up the paint. And I give it a couple of coats of the gloss, and then I give it 1 or 2 coats of the satin, sanding in between each coat. And now I only painted the edge banding. I didn't want to get paint on the drawers or even in the cubbies because I don't want the paint to inhibit the slip and slide of the drawers. Almost all but about 10 of the drawers fit perfectly. The others had to be adjusted just slightly. And I had, each night I went and I made some more drawers. These took the longest. These were the longest cuts. And here you can see me assembling the drawers. I developed a little bit of a assembly line as I made my way through them. I glued them with Type-On 3 and I air nailed them, and I made sure each one of the nails was discreetly placed. You won't see any of the nails when the drawers pull in and out. They're from the bottom up and from the ends in. One end is going to be hidden deep inside of the cubby, and the other one's going to be hidden behind the face of the drawer. So that's why you got to be careful when you put the nails in. You got to be conscientious that they're going to be showing. If not, it doesn't matter. And I'm checking each one fits perfectly in certain spots. If it's tight in one spot, it fits perfectly in the other. So I keep moving them around and checking them. And then ultimately I had to, about 8 or 10 of them I had to custom fit. And that means taking off 2 or 3 millimeters here and there. And wow, I can't believe I got this far. And again, using the construction adhesive and my 23 gauge nailer. I called it a 32 gauge nailer earlier in the conversation. And the construction adhesive gives me some time to get the drawers where I want them. And I just eyeballed the spacing in between. Each drawer does have a little bit of lateral movement, millimeters, 2-3 millimeters movement. There's enough air gap so I could adjust them. In that spacer, I was able to put them in place, nail them, and then open the drawer and clamp them. Because that air nailer, or I keep calling it an air nailer, but obviously it's a battery operated 23 gauge nailer, does not have the capacity to pull it in. What it does is it locks it in its place, because I put 4 nails in each one. So then when I open the drawers up later and I put the clamps on it, it squeezes them into place. And now it's time to place the handles that I got off of Amazon. And I made a drill pattern, and this is just made up with some scrap. And every time I place it, it gives me perfect placement for the screw holes for these faux brass card holders, pull handles. I tried a couple of different ones, but these are the only ones I found that I liked that I could screw in from the front. The others you had to go in from the inside. It seemed like it was going to be too complicated. And now here I am. I saved you the boredom of watching me put on all the screws. And we're in pretty good shape. The drawers come out and the top is not attached for the next phase, which would be to move it into the building. And look at that. I'm really happy with this. 6-7 day build. Did I tell you that already? And now if you saw my table build where I made a table that went up to the 2nd floor of my new barn, I kept my forklift arrangement, my forklift, hackneyed forklift, and we put it on that. And this is David the Mexican Carpenter and all of his guys. They're here putting the siding on the barn, which is going to be in a future video. A new barn update is incoming. And I'm so glad I saved this. I was going to take it apart because it's got a lot of really expensive screws in it. And it's like, let me hang on to it. I know the screws are in there if I need them. It's got a bunch of expensive 8-inch screws in there. The screws are about $2 a piece. And here we are. We're up in the upper floor. And this is going to be a railing to keep people from falling into the stairwell. But it's also going to double as a spot to put all my findings, zippers, anything related to sewing, anything related to my leatherwork. There's the top, which I fastened on later on after I got it in exactly the spot where I wanted it. So you don't see me screw it. I just toe-nailed it up from underneath inside with a couple of 1-inch screws. And let's just take a look at that forklift again in case you didn't see it in an earlier video. It only comes up like a ramp right here to this. It's as high as I can get it to go, but it worked perfect. We could have wrestled it through the stairwell, but it just would not have been as fun and exciting, and definitely wouldn't have been as photogenic. Now here it is. We put all the drawers in place, and man, this thing is going to really solve a lot of problems. I spent this afternoon putting a lot of the things in the drawers themselves. I did not paint the drawers, as you notice, and that was so I can maintain the tolerance. The only thing keeping these drawers from going in and out quickly is it's sucking and pulling on air. And because I put that construction adhesive on nearly every edge, it really sucks and pulls on the compartment right in which it's in. That's Rachel's hand, that's not my hand. And the final building inspector's coming to make sure everything's in place. If you don't follow me on Patreon, find me on Patreon for more behind the scenes. For instance, lots of behind the scenes on this as I start any new build. I do all behind the scenes stuff. Thank you for following along, and merch is at my merch store. Get yourself a nice pick. Thank you, everybody.